I had always been intrigued by the unknown, fascinated by the things that most people preferred to avoid. Haunted houses, urban legends, ghost stories. These were the kinds of things that made my heart race, not out of fear, but excitement. So when I received the invitation to spend a night in Thorn Manor, a mansion reputed to be one of the most haunted properties in the country, I didn't hesitate. The letter came to me out of the blue, an elegant script on parchment that seemed far too old for a modern letter. It promised me an experience unlike any other, a chance to test my courage and get paid handsomely for my time. What could go wrong? I didn't know much about Thorn Manor beyond the whispers that floated around town. People spoke of the place like it was cursed. No one dared go near it, especially after dark. It had been abandoned for decades, and most of the locals steered clear of the estate. But a quick search online revealed that the mansion had a rich history. Built in the late 1800s, it had been the home of a wealthy family, the Thorns, whose tragic end had led to its downfall. All of them were found dead under mysterious circumstances, and after that, the house had remained empty. The manor's reputation grew darker with each passing year. Still, I wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. I had made my name as an amateur paranormal investigator, documenting hauntings and creepy encounters for my blog. The prospect of spending the night in a mansion with such a rich history, full of ghost stories and unexplained occurrences, felt like a dream come true. The letter had been simple. You are invited to spend one night in Thorn Manor. Arrive at midnight, stay the night, and experience the mysteries for yourself. Should you survive, you will receive a generous reward. I wasn't sure what they meant by survive, but I figured it was just some exaggerated wording to make it sound more dramatic. After all, it was just a haunted house, right? The thought that it could be more than that never crossed my mind. I packed my bag, bringing along my camera, a few EMF detectors, and a trusty flashlight. I told my friends I'd be gone for the night, and I drove to the mansion under the cover of darkness. The mansion stood at the end of a long, narrow road, surrounded by overgrown trees and a thick mist that seemed to hang in the air like a veil. The place was exactly as I imagined, grand, imposing, and eerily silent. The windows were dark, the mansion seemingly empty, but as I stepped out of my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I approached the front door, which creaked open as though it had been waiting for me. A voice from within, soft and almost too smooth to be real, called my name from the shadows. "Welcome," it said, as if the house itself had been expecting me. The door closed behind me with a slow, deliberate thud, and I knew then that I had stepped into something much bigger than I had anticipated. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and the smell of aged wood and mildew filled my nose. The grand chandelier above me hung low, casting long shadows over the marble floors. The grand staircase spiraled upward, disappearing into darkness. And the mirrors. Everywhere I looked, there were mirrors, tall, ornate, and reflecting the ghostly light that flickered from the sconces on the walls. Each one seemed to gleam with an unnatural gleam, as though watching me, waiting. The host, a pale man in an old-fashioned suit, greeted me in the foyer. His face was gaunt, his smile thin, but there was something oddly comforting about him. He introduced himself as Mr. Thorn, a distant relative of the original family. He had inherited the property years ago but had never been able to sell it due to its notorious reputation. Instead, he had decided to open it up to people like me, offering a reward to anyone brave enough to spend a night within its walls. "You'll find everything you need for your stay in the library," Mr. Thorne said. "But I must warn you, the house has a way of revealing things. It shows what you fear most." I nodded, thinking it was just another ominous warning meant to add to the atmosphere. I followed him into the library, where he gave me a key to my room and showed me to a large, opulent suite overlooking the estate. The room was cold, even with the fireplace lit, and the mirrors, there were more mirrors, lined the walls. Each one seemed to grow more unsettling the longer I looked at them. When Mr. Thorne left me alone, I sat on the edge of the bed, unpacking my gear. I set up my camera and equipment, wondering what kind of haunting I was about to document. The thought of capturing paranormal evidence excited me, but as I prepared for the night ahead, a sense of dread began to creep into my bones. I couldn't explain it, but I felt like I wasn't alone in the room. The mirrors, those damn mirrors, felt like they were watching me. With a shake of my head, I dismissed the thought and began to investigate the room. But as I passed one of the mirrors, I froze. The reflection in the glass didn't match my movements. My reflection stood still, staring back at me, even as I moved. My stomach dropped. I stood frozen in front of the mirror, my heart thudding in my chest as I stared at my reflection. I moved my hand, and the image of me in the glass remained still, staring back with eerie, unnatural stillness. It wasn't just delayed, as if the mirror was a few seconds behind. It was completely frozen, like a photograph of me captured at the exact moment I moved but not responding. I reached out again, slowly, my fingers brushing against the cold glass. The reflection mirrored my movements exactly, until I stopped moving. My reflection did not. It stood there, eerily still, as if it were waiting for me to do something else. A chill ran down my spine, and I stepped back, breaking my gaze from the mirror. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I glanced back at the reflection. It was still, just as it had been moments before. But this time, something was different. My reflection was smiling, just slightly, barely noticeable, but the corners of my lips seemed to twitch upward as though mocking me. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and stepped closer to the mirror, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. My own reflection shouldn't be acting independently, should it? The air around me grew colder as I stared at the glass, but I couldn't tear myself away from it. "All right, calm down," I muttered to myself, trying to force my thoughts to be logical. "It's just an old house. Maybe there's a trick with the mirrors, or it's some sort of optical illusion." But even as I said it, I could feel the discomfort growing, gnawing at the back of my mind. I turned away from the mirror and moved toward the bed, hoping to distract myself with some of the equipment I'd brought. I needed to start documenting, capture some evidence, as any good paranormal investigator would. I set up the camera and checked my EMF reader, making sure everything was working. But the moment I stopped moving, the hairs on my neck prickled. There was something behind me. I wasn't sure what it was, but I could feel it, watching. I glanced over my shoulder, but the room was empty. I stared at the mirror, knowing I had to check it again, even though every instinct in me screamed not to. Slowly, I turned back toward the reflective surface, my eyes locked on my own image. This time, I didn't move. I just stood there, watching, waiting for something, anything to change. At first, nothing happened. My reflection was still, just as it should be. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it, the faintest movement in the mirror. My reflection's head tilted slightly to the side. The smile, it was bigger now, more pronounced, creeping across my reflection's face. The eyes, my eyes, no longer looked like mine. They were hollow, dark, empty. A cold sweat broke out across my skin. I backed away from the mirror again, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just some trick of the light or an optical illusion. What the hell is going on here? I whispered to myself, my voice trembling. The room felt colder. The flickering of the candlelight seemed to cast long, grotesque shadows across the walls, stretching unnaturally. I looked around at the other mirrors in the room. The tall, full-length mirror near the door, the small one above the dresser, all of them reflected the room the same way. But the presence of the room felt different. It wasn't the comforting presence of an old mansion. It was oppressive, alive. I couldn't stay here, not like this. I had to get out. I grabbed my flashlight from the bedside table and my bag of equipment. The mirror, the reflections, had already messed with my head too much, but there was something else in the air now. Something wrong. I needed air. I needed to get outside. I walked quickly toward the door, my heart racing, but as I passed the mirror again, I froze. My reflection hadn't moved from where it had been, but as I glanced into it, I saw something else. Someone else behind me. I spun around, the flashlight clutched tightly in my hand, but the room was empty. There was no one there, no shadowy figure lurking, no person standing behind me. Just me and my reflection, both standing perfectly still in the dim light. But my reflection was different now. It was still smiling. No, it was grinning, its teeth too sharp, too many. The eyes, they weren't my eyes anymore. They were something else, black as night, empty. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. I reached for the doorknob, my hands shaking violently, and flung it open. I bolted into the hallway, my feet barely touching the floor, the sound of my racing heart pounding in my ears. I had to get out. I had to leave the mansion before whatever was in those mirrors consumed me completely. But as I stepped into the hallway, I froze again. The hallway was different. The floorboards, which had been dark wood, now seemed to be covered in something. Black, slick, like oil. The walls were closing in, narrowing as though the house itself were shifting, rearranging its bones. The doors at the end of the hall, all of them, were closed, but I could feel something pulling me toward them. An urge, a whisper in the air. And there, in the corner of the hallway, I saw another mirror. It wasn't there before, but now it was there, reflecting my every move, every step. And as I approached, I could see myself clearly, standing in front of it. And behind me, just behind my shoulder, was her. A figure, an outline of a woman, her face obscured in shadows, her fingers pressed against the glass as if reaching for me. I turned quickly, but the hallway was empty again. There was no one there, just the heavy, suffocating silence. I took a step back, my hand reaching for the walls, but they seemed to shift and bend beneath my touch. The mansion wasn't just a house. It was alive, breathing, waiting, and I realized, with sickening clarity, that I wasn't just a visitor here. I was part of the mansion's reflection now, and there would be no way out. I didn't know how much longer I could stand it. The house had become a labyrinth of shifting walls, whispering shadows and reflections that weren't my own. The deeper I went, the more I realized that there was no escaping the hold it had on me. I had seen it in the mirrors, my death, but I couldn't understand it. What did it mean? How was it even possible? The hallway stretched before me like a dark tunnel, the light from the candle in my hand flickering wildly. The walls seemed to close in tighter with each step I took, and the air felt colder. I turned back, my eyes scanning the space behind me, but all I saw was the empty, oppressive darkness. I could still feel the presence of the mirrors, their cold glass reflecting my every movement. But the feeling wasn't the same as before. Now they felt like they were watching me, not just reflecting. The air was thick with something I couldn't name. Fear, yes, but it was deeper than that. It was like the house itself was alive, a sentient being that knew me, knew what I feared, what I would do next. It had been waiting for me, and now that I had stepped inside, I was trapped in its grasp. I was no longer sure where I was. The hallway had changed since I'd entered. The doors, which had once been lined up on either side, now seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I walked further, the glow from the candle casting long, shaky shadows ahead of me. Each door seemed to lead into darkness, but I knew better than to approach them. Every room I had opened since I arrived had been full of things that didn't belong, things I couldn't explain. As I walked past another mirror, I stopped, unwilling to ignore the growing feeling that the glass was more than just a reflection. I faced it, my heartbeat echoing in my ears, and saw her again. The woman, the figure, was still there, standing behind me. She wasn't a ghost. No, she was something else, something worse. I could see her clearly now, her hands pressed against the glass, her eyes dark and hollow, her face twisted in a silent scream. It wasn't a reflection of me anymore. It was as if she had been waiting for me to see her. I tried to turn, but the floor beneath me felt like it was shifting again, as if it had become unstable, like the very structure of the house was bending, pulling me in different directions. The lights flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw the walls close in around me. The woman's reflection smiled at me. No. She grinned, her mouth stretching impossibly wide, her teeth jagged and sharp. I felt the weight of her stare, her presence, like an iron grip tightening around my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. With one last, frantic effort, I spun away from the mirror, desperate to get out of this hallway, out of the house. But before I could take a single step, I heard a voice. It was soft at first, barely a whisper, but it echoed through the walls, vibrating through the ground beneath me. The voice was familiar but distorted. "You can't leave." I froze, my blood running cold. It wasn't just a voice, it was the house itself. I could feel it, as though the very walls were speaking to me, wrapping around my mind. I closed my eyes, trying to block it out, but the words continued to echo in my head. "You are part of the house now." I didn't know what that meant, but it didn't matter. I felt the truth of it sink into my bones. The house wasn't just haunted. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had chosen me. I was no longer a visitor. I was part of the nightmare, part of the curse that had claimed this place long ago. The mirrors, the whispers, the shifting walls, they were all connected. This house had been built on something ancient, something that could never truly die, something that was waiting for someone like me. And now, I was trapped in its clutches. There would be no escape. I turned quickly, but the hallway seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness growing deeper with each step I took. I couldn't go back to the room I had stayed in. That mirror had shown me something, a glimpse of my own death. But it wasn't just my death. The figure in the mirror wasn't me. It was a reflection of something else, something that had taken me, claimed me, and now it was waiting for me to step into its trap. I knew I had to leave, but I also knew I couldn't. The house wouldn't let me. The mirror wasn't just a portal, it was a window to the past, to the future, to the end. and what it showed me wasn't just my death, it was the death of all who had come before me, the ones who had tried to escape, the ones who had failed. And as I reached the end of the hallway, I saw it, the final door. It was different from the others. It was made of dark wood, carved with strange, intricate designs that seemed to shift in the dim light. The door was slightly ajar, as though it was waiting for me to open it. I took a deep breath and pushed it open. What I saw on the other side was a room bathed in darkness, but there, in the center, was a large, full-length mirror, and when I looked into it, I saw not just myself, I saw my death, and the reflection wasn't mine anymore. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning as I stared into the mirror, transfixed by what I saw. My reflection had shifted, morphed into something that wasn't quite me. The face in the mirror was pale, unnaturally so, and the eyes, my eyes, were empty, dark voids, like I had been swallowed whole by the very glass itself. But the most chilling part? I wasn't standing still. The reflection of me in the mirror was moving on its own. My reflection smiled, a twisted, unsettling grin that spread unnaturally wide across its face, too wide for any human mouth. The figure in the mirror raised its hand, mirroring my own, but its movements were slow and deliberate, as if it were savoring the moment, enjoying my terror. I watched in horror as its fingers twitched, moving toward my throat, toward the spot where I could feel the tightness in my chest, the growing pressure. "You belong to the house now." The voice was faint at first, a whisper, but it echoed in the room, reverberating through my skull, as though the words were coming from everywhere at once. My reflection's mouth didn't move, but I could hear it clearly, like it was being spoken directly in my mind. I reached out instinctively, hoping to break the connection, to pull myself away from the mirror. But the moment my fingers brushed the cold glass, the figure's smile grew wider, almost impossibly so, and I felt a sharp pain shoot through my chest. It was as if the mirror had taken a piece of me, a part of my soul. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps, the room around me warping as I tried to make sense of what was happening. This couldn't be real. This was impossible. Yet, every fiber of my being screamed that I wasn't just imagining it. There was something in the air, something heavy and ancient, and it wasn't just a ghostly apparition, it was alive. The house itself was alive, feeding off me, pulling me deeper into its curse. I turned around, desperate to get away from the mirror, but the walls had changed again. The room, which had once been normal, was now stretching, warping, becoming darker. The familiar doors, windows, and walls had disappeared, replaced by long, winding hallways that seemed to go on forever. The house had grown larger, its structure expanding, swallowing me whole. The boundaries between reality and the supernatural had dissolved, and I was trapped within it. I needed to escape. The air was suffocating, the temperature freezing, and I could feel my mind slipping. The house was feeding off my fear, and I couldn't let it win. I stumbled toward the door, my hands shaking as I reached for the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Panic surged through me, my heart racing as I tried to wrench the door open, but the lock was solid. It was like the house had decided that I wasn't leaving, that I was part of it now. The whispers grew louder, clearer, and I heard the voices, the others, their voices overlapping, as though they were speaking from behind the walls, from within the very house itself. "You can't leave." The voice was now unmistakable, unmistakably mine. It was my voice, but distorted, twisted, a version of me that didn't belong. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my face as I clutched at my chest, gasping for air that seemed to vanish before it could reach my lungs. I had broken the rules. I had stepped into this cursed place, and now the price was being paid. The house wasn't going to let me go. In the corner of the room, I saw it again, the figure from the mirror. But this time, it was stepping toward me, its face no longer a reflection, but a real, physical presence. It was tall, its features sharp and hollow, a twisted version of me with eyes that burned black and empty. It grinned again, its teeth unnaturally sharp, and it stepped closer, its footsteps slow and deliberate, echoing in the thick silence. "You're part of us now," the figure said, its voice low and gravelly, just like the others. I tried to scream, to beg for mercy, but the words wouldn't come. The figure reached out, its cold, pale hand extending toward me. I could feel its presence now, pressing against my skin, like ice sinking deep into my bones. My body stiffened, and I couldn't move. The weight of its gaze was suffocating. The house does not let go. The figure's smile widened, impossibly wide, as its hand hovered just above my face. The mirrors never lie. It was too much. The room, the house, the mirrors, all of it was closing in on me. I wanted to run, but I was paralyzed, my mind overwhelmed with the suffocating realization that I was never going to escape. I had been drawn into this place, and now it had claimed me. I was another soul trapped within its walls, another face in the mirrors, another lost spirit in the cursed house. As the figure's hand finally reached for me, I could feel the cold touch of death wrapping around me, taking hold of my very soul. I couldn't fight it anymore. "You'll be here forever," the figure whispered as its hand descended onto my forehead. "Just like me." The moment the figure's hand touched my forehead, I felt it. The cold, unrelenting grasp of something ancient, something far older than the house itself. My body seized up, every muscle stiffening, as if frozen in place. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I could feel my own heart racing, but it was distant, muffled, like it didn't belong to me anymore. The figure's smile grew wider, impossibly so, and as I stared at its face, I saw something shift, something more than just a reflection. The air around me seemed to ripple, like the room itself was distorting, bending around me. It wasn't just the figure in front of me, it was the house. The house was alive, and it was pulling me deeper into its heart. The whispers grew louder again, surrounding me, filling my mind with their unearthly chorus. They weren't just voices anymore. They were memories, my memories, flashing before my eyes. I saw glimpses of my past, childhood moments, family gatherings, fleeting thoughts I had long since forgotten. But they weren't just memories. They were reflections. The house was showing me who I was, who I had been, and the terrifying truth of what I was becoming. I wanted to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the air, consumed by the darkness. My throat closed, as though the house itself was strangling me, its invisible tendrils wrapping around my neck, tightening, choking. I gasped for air, but it was as if the very atmosphere had become thick, dense, like I was drowning in it. The figure's hand still rested on my forehead, and I could feel its touch seeping into me, into my very soul. "This is where you belong," the figure whispered, its voice dripping with malice. "This is where all lost souls end up." I felt the ground beneath me shift again. The air trembled with an unnatural energy, and I realized with a sickening clarity that I was no longer standing in the room. The room itself had disappeared. The walls, the mirrors, the doors. They were all gone. There was only the figure and me and the oppressive weight of the house itself. I could hear the house's pulse now, its slow, rhythmic beating, like the sound of a heart that never stopped. It was the pulse of the house, and it was mine now. I was part of it, part of its curse. There was no escaping. There was no running. The house had claimed me. And then I saw it. In the distance, beyond the shadows, I saw another figure. It was faint at first, just a blur in the darkness, but as it moved closer, I could make it out. It was me. Or, rather, it was a reflection of me. My reflection, but it wasn't how I looked now. It was how I would look when my time in the house was over. The figure had the same eyes, the same face, but it was hollow. The light in its eyes was gone, replaced by an emptiness that felt colder than the deepest winter. I took a step back, my body shaken as I realized the truth. The reflection wasn't just a part of the house, it was the house itself. The house had been waiting for me to cross the threshold, to break the rules. It wasn't a place, it wasn't a building, it was a living thing, a force that existed to consume, to claim. The figure in front of me tilted its head, its eyes locked onto mine, and I realized, with a sickening clarity, that it wasn't just watching me, it was me. It was my death reflected back at me. "You are the next one," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind, as though the house itself was speaking through it. The house does not let go, not of you, not of anyone. The reflection stepped forward, its movement slow, deliberate, as if it were savoring every moment. It reached out with its cold hand, and I felt the same chill run through my body. I tried to pull away, to escape, but the shadows wrapped around me, pulling me in, trapping me. I was frozen in place, frozen in time. "You cannot leave," the reflection repeated. "You are one of us now." I closed my eyes, the overwhelming fear and dread closing in on me, suffocating me. I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream. But deep down, I knew there was no fighting it. I was already part of the house. I was already one of the lost souls trapped within its walls. The house had taken my soul, had claimed me, and I realized now that there was no escaping it. I was just another reflection in its endless mirrors, another lost soul that would never leave. And then I opened my eyes. The reflection was gone. The room had changed again, the walls shifting, the mirrors gone. I was no longer standing in front of the mirrors, but in the center of an empty room, one that felt too real, and I realized, with a dawning horror, that it wasn't just the room that had changed. I had changed. I wasn't in control anymore. The house had consumed me, had pulled me into its world, and now I was a part of it. The air in the room shifted as I blinked, trying to adjust to the overwhelming sensation of being both present and somewhere else. I felt like I was standing between two worlds, neither fully real, but both undeniable. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, they all seemed to pulse with a strange energy, like the house itself was alive, breathing, and watching. The weight of the house's presence settled around me like a heavy fog, and the feeling of being trapped deepened with each passing moment. I stepped forward, or at least I tried to. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor, and as I moved, it was as if the very space around me was shifting, altering, as though the house was rearranging itself to trap me even further. The mirrors, the ones that had shown me my death, were gone. But I knew, deep down, that they hadn't disappeared. They had simply been hidden, tucked away in the recesses of my mind, waiting for the moment when they would reveal themselves once more. I turned toward the center of the room, and for the first time, I saw the true reflection. It wasn't just a mirror. It was the room itself, the reality of it, twisted into something unrecognizable. And standing in front of me was the reflection of myself. But it wasn't me. It was a hollow, empty version of me, its eyes dark and lifeless, its smile too wide, too knowing. My heart pounded in my chest as I took a step back, but the reflection in front of me didn't move. It stayed perfectly still, staring at me, waiting for me to understand. My chest tightened as I tried to breathe, but the air felt thick, constricting. I could feel the house, the presence, wrapping around me like an iron cage. "You're here forever." The words came softly, almost kindly from the reflection, but they carried the weight of finality. There is no escape. The house has claimed you. I tried to speak, to argue, to shout, but my voice was trapped inside me. I couldn't force the words out, couldn't make sense of the suffocating silence. The reflection didn't speak again. Instead, it just stood there, waiting, as though it were offering me a choice I no longer had. I stumbled backward, feeling the coldness of the air seep into my bones. My mind raced. I had been warned, hadn't I? I'd been told, in the most cryptic way possible, that the diner, the mansion, was more than just a building. It was a living thing, and it would claim me just as it had claimed so many others. But I hadn't believed it. I hadn't wanted to believe it. I had thought I could leave, that I could survive this. But now, as I stood in the center of this cursed room, with my reflection staring back at me with that sickening grin, I realized the truth. The mansion was the reflection. The mirrors weren't just showing me what I wanted to see, they were showing me my fate. And now, it was too late. There was no way out. I had crossed the point of no return. I looked around the room one last time, hoping for something, anything that could pull me out of this nightmare. But the walls were closing in. The darkness was swallowing the light. The space was shrinking, and there was no room left to escape. I turned back toward the reflection. It was still staring at me, waiting. The reflection raised its hand, and I knew it was coming for me. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't run. The figure in the mirror was me. It was the part of me that the house had claimed, the part that had died the moment I stepped into this place. "You were always meant to be here," the reflection whispered, its voice full of cold certainty. "You were never meant to leave." I tried to speak, tried to scream, but no sound came. The air around me thickened, and the reflection's hand reached out, brushing against the glass as if it could feel my presence. I felt my legs give out beneath me, my body collapse into the floor as I was drawn closer, pulled toward the glass. It felt like a force was yanking me toward the mirror, as though the room itself was feeding off me, consuming me piece by piece. And then, as if a switch had been flipped, the mirror shimmered. The reflection changed. It was no longer just me. The room around me shifted again, warping and twisting as the walls of the mansion seemed to stretch impossibly long. But I was still staring into the mirror, unable to break free. The reflection began to change, warping into something new, something darker, something that wasn't me at all. It was the end. My reflection was now fully consumed by the house, a hollow version of myself, and the presence I had felt all this time was now overwhelming, suffocating. The mansion had taken me, claimed me as part of its eternal cycle. The figure in the mirror reached out one final time, its hand stretching far beyond the glass, and I felt it. The cold fingers pressing against my face, pulling me into the dark. And just like that, I disappeared into the reflection.